Hello, everybody, and welcome into Commodity Culture, where our goal is to make you a better investor in the commodities sector. Today is March 18th, 2026. My name is Jesse Day, and before we dive in today, standard disclaimer, nothing here is investment advice. Do your own due diligence. And my guest is the CEO of Altura Energy, an exploration and production company focused on helium with interests in the Holbrook Basin of Arizona. Ashley Lastinger, great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Jesse.
I want to dive into helium today because this is a commodity that doesn't get a lot of press, but is nonetheless vitally important. So, why don't you lay out for us, first of all, the main uses for helium and what the market dynamics for helium look like today?
Yeah. So when people think about helium, most people think about party balloons, right? And making your voice sound funny. And lifting gas is definitely one of the uses for heliums for both party balloons and like your meteorological weather balloons. But there are a lot of other lesser known and actually super important uses for our everyday lives. So you've got leak detection. Helium is used in leak detection because of its tiny particle size and inert qualities. You've got aerospace, so pressurizing rocket fuel tanks, purging fuel lines, things like that. You've got healthcare, so when an MRI machine takes your picture, the superconducting magnets are cooled with helium. And we're seeing a really large deployment of new MRI machines going into developing nations as they increase kind of their healthcare technology and availability. And then finally, you've got manufacturing. And so specifically with computer hardware and semiconductors. And so helium provides a controlled space for growing silicon crystals and manufacturing computer chips that are found in literally any electronic device. So with the AI boom, the need for semiconductors is at its all-time high. And so you can imagine, therefore, helium need is at its all-time high.
That's really interesting. So, would you say at this point in time, the main kind of driver for helium demand is coming from that semiconductor industry, kind of backed by the AI data center buildouts?
Correct.
Okay, well, I mentioned helium wasn't really in the headlines, but we have seen it more in the headlines recently due to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Could you walk us through how much the conflict in the Middle East has affected helium supply chains and how much it has put pressure on the helium market?
Yeah, so while the Strait of Hormuz is definitely a critical piece to the worldwide transportation of helium, it's actually kind of more of a short term problem. The long term, bigger problem that most people have no idea about is that in the midst of all of this, Qatar's Ras Laffan refinery, which is the world's single largest source of helium production, like a third of the world's global supply, which is a byproduct of their natural gas processing, it was damaged. And so I should say it was the third largest or the largest single source. So when the refinery was damaged, their helium-2 plant was damaged. And so Qatar Energy has already come out, declared force majeure, and is looking at least 3 to 5 year time frame to get back operational. So even if the strait was opened tomorrow, it wouldn't really matter because there's not any helium to sell.
So, what about what do global supply chains for helium now look like in the aftermath of that? What are the main helium producing regions in the world? What are the supply demand fundamentals looking like at present now that, as you said, the number one source is being taken offline?
Yeah. So you've got a third of the world off the board. The US produces about 44% or so of the world's helium. So they're the main producer, with Qatar being number two. You've got Russia at about 9 to 10%, Algeria around 6, and then a spread out of other companies, including Canada, that make up the remaining. So obviously the supply chain right now is constrained. At least 90% of the world's helium is a byproduct of that natural gas processing. For one, you can't just magically add capacity to refineries or natural gas processing plants or LNG facilities, right? Those projects take years. But let's say that you could. Okay, most oil and natural gas wells, the helium concentration in it is less than 1%, really closer to like 0.5% if you're lucky. And so the economics for those wells are not determined by helium concentration. Frankly, it's not really looked at as part of the economics at all. And so it's more for your conventional energy companies about the hydrocarbon makeup, not the helium concentration. However, you do have a small percentage of the population who works in what's called the green helium space, where the carrying gas is not carbon based. It's not your methane, butane, ethane, propane. It's nothing like that. It's nitrogen. And so Altura actually happens to be one of those entities. And so our helium concentrations are considerably higher, and the economics of those wells are based solely on the helium. The same physics of petroleum engineering apply as your normal oil and gas wells, but the output's just a tad different.
Well, in your investor deck, you mentioned that one of the key factors contributing to helium shortages is the privatization of the U.S. Federal Helium Reserve. Now, this was a storage facility and pipeline that held over 1 billion cubic meters of helium and was sold to a private gas company in 2024. How has that contributed to the supply squeeze on helium?
Yeah, the loss of the Cliffside facility as the Federal Helium Reserve has not helped, especially in the time of crisis. So you think about it, there's no more government managed stockpile, right? Which means there's no Federal Reserve to strategize and stabilize the market during shortages like we're in now. The BLM, when this was a thing, the BLM controlled pricing, and it was previously kind of set as the global benchmark. So market prices are expected to rise, driven by increased private control, higher logistics cost, and then obviously what's happened in the Middle East, which is then exacerbating the shortages, causing even higher prices. And it's actually kind of ironic if you read the exact verbiage of the Helium Privatization Act of 1996 and then the Helium Stewardship Act of 2013. The analysis from 30 years ago, even 13 years ago, basically concluded that privatization would have a minimum market disruption. And obviously they couldn't have known about the advances in technology or anything like that in the meantime, but they were incorrect in their assumption.
So I didn't have this question prepared, but I'd love to follow up just for a moment there, and then we'll dive into Altura Energy and the role you're playing. With all of this focus now on critical minerals, we're seeing a lot of different elements get added to critical minerals list. Do you think there comes a point where the United States government looks once again at helium as a strategic asset, and perhaps we could see some government support behind the sector coming from the political class as well?
Yeah, I do. It was originally taken off the critical minerals list a few years ago due to the fact that it did not meet the import requirement. But I do think with not only what's going on in the Middle East, but we do have, people like Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company installing a new, semiconductor plant in Phoenix. I think that the need for it is going to be very, very large in the U.S. From kind of a global offtake way. So yes, I do think it's going to be back on the critical minerals list sooner rather than later.
What is Altura Energy's role in the helium market? Could you give us an overview of the company and your long-term game plan when it comes to helium?
Altura is a public small cap energy company whose focus right now is on green helium. We've got assets in Apache County, Arizona, within the Holbrook Basin that totals about 16,000 acres. The proven formations within our assets have about 5 to 8% helium concentration, so significantly higher than your normal oil and gas well. We are currently producing helium, which does set us apart from many of our competitors. And we have more plans to bring on additional wells online this year. We've got several projects within our current assets that are keeping us very busy, and that really has been our main focus since kind of revamping the company in 2025, monetizing the assets that we currently have, specifically in that green helium space.
Well, let's talk about your various projects. You've got a number of them in Arizona, including Saddle Horse Draw, Navajo Springs, and Puerco Ridge. Why don't you walk us through what stage each project is in, any milestones achieved so far, and plans moving forward, wherever details you think are important for investors to be paying attention to?
I'm super excited about our assets because it has a little bit of everything. So Saddle Horse Draw is where we have proven production. When I came on board mid 2025, all of the Saddle Horse Draw wells were shut in. And after performing an engineering analysis, I was able to determine that the barrier was a couple of different things. And in 2 wells, I was able to work them over and fix them. But then we discovered that the pipeline was inoperable. So first step is repairing and replacing part of the pipeline, bringing the 2 wells back online that I was able to work over last year. And that work is in progress and very, very close to being completed. And so after that, we'll do some logging and an additional workover of 4 more wells, bringing the total of wells online this year to 6. And then something that I should kind of double down on is that we have access and contract to a processing plant, which also kind of sets us apart from many companies, is that we actually, that pipeline's going to the processing plant. We have the contract. And so we are producing and we are selling helium as well. And then we've got Navajo Springs, which is where our new well drilling program will be. We have been able to secure a farm-in agreement in the surrounding sections to where we have some non-operated production, where we own about 20%. And so we're working right now on all the land work needs that need to be done prior to permitting and then scheduling a drilling rig for that program. And then finally, we've got Puerco Ridge. Puerco Ridge is our exploratory play. And so based on old well logs from the 50s and 60s in the area, we know that there is some sort of anticline on our acreage. We just don't know how big it is. So is it 150 acres? Is it 150,000 acres? We don't know. So our plan this year is to shoot 3 2D seismic lines to identify just how large that field actually is. And then probably into next year, drill some exploratory wells to see what we've got. And we're working on the land work for that right now. So like I said, a little bit of everything. We've got existing production, new well drilling, and exploration.
Talk to us about the team behind Altura Energy and how you plan to leverage their expertise to advance your projects, starting with yourself and your own background and how you came to take the helm as CEO.
Yeah, so my background is in petroleum engineering. I also have a master's of energy business. I've been in the energy sector almost 20 years now. I've worked every facet of petroleum engineering, drilling, completions, production, facility, reservoir engineering, and have worked every type of play onshore in the U.S. So I've done heavy oil in the San Joaquin Valley, to conventional oil and gas in the Anadarko Basin, to unconventional oil and gas in the Eagle Ford. So I've kind of touched it all. And behind me on our board of directors, they're amazing. We've got Rob Johnston, who I first met at Apache when he was the executive vice president there. Later went to work for him at his company, Atalaya Resources. And then we've got Ian Telfer, who was the former chairman of Goldcorp. And both have been really instrumental in getting the company on the right path. I was brought in July of last year, basically to identify, hey, we've got this asset. Is it salvageable? Is it something that, we can take to the next level? And all of 2025, that was kind of my goal. Determined that it is. And so 2026 is all about execution.
Awesome. Well, that's a great segue into talking about the main catalysts and news flow that will be coming out of Altura for the remainder of 2026. What is coming up that you think investors could be looking forward to?
So first things first, you're going to hear about our pipeline, which will be done very, very shortly. And then you'll hear about those wells coming back online as well. And then we'll do the work on the 4 subsequent wells. So you'll hear about those. Then within Navajo Springs, you'll hear about the completion of the land work, permitting of our new well drilling program, and then finally the execution and hopefully the results of the seismic in Puerco Ridge. So it's going to be a really busy year.
Great. Well, is there anything we haven't yet discussed or anything you think it's important to emphasize the potential shareholders of Altura Energy should be focused on?
Yeah, I think the key points to remember about Altura are really simple, and it's just 3 things. Number 1, we're a green helium producer with access to a processing plant. We've got low risk development plans within 2 of our assets, right? It's either existing production or drilling based off of existing production. And then you've got high impact upside within our exploratory play. So assuming all goes well, we've got room to run for a very long time.
Well, I'm going to put links in the description below to Altura Energy's website as well as social media so people can follow along with the company. Ashley, it's been a great conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse.
Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.